the background information, lots of mapping that's comes from spatial planning and heritage in the city.
Okay.
I think you guys have that base information.
Yeah,
I'll double check with them.
those are in our references or resource folder.
Okay,
I'm not sure. Are you one of the guest lecturers now at the end of the monthish or 24th? Because we have like a sort of a block week session on
he
campus
hasn't
there.
asked me.
Okay.
I
Okay.
hope not.
Okay. Okay. No, because
You guys
then
are
that
CPUT, right?
yes.
Okay, no. So we do have a lecture plan for UCT, but not for CPUT at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, but I will show you some of the stuff that we've talked to UCT about before, because I
Okay.
think that's actually the easiest way. I was looking at your questions and like, bruh, 22 questions, too many. So I think the best way to tackle this is probably for me to first explain what the projects were, so you have a bit more of an understanding of what our projects were, and then we can kind of, you'll be able to make up your own mind about the questions. And also the questions they're quite repetitive, like some of them are reframing the
Mm,
previous question or question from earlier. So I think it's probably easier for you, once I've explained to you what our project is about, you can kind of make up your own mind about what the answers would be. And some of them are quite obvious. It's like, we had an extensive public participation process, and that's the answer to like 8 of the questions, you know. Um,
mm,
but yeah, because each one of these could be like an essay. So
yeah.
yeah, I think it's probably better, since we have presented this to students at UCT, and I think we've I don't know if my boss has presented things to CPUT. I think so. Um, but just to try and explain, kind of give you an overview of what we did, I think, rather than like delve straight into the questions, because you can't ask the questions if you don't know what the project is yet, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. How many group members do you have that need to join?
I think in terms of time, I also don't want to waste your time. So I am recording the session. I hope you don't mind.
Okay. No, that's good.
But if they join, they join. If not, then they can just look at the recording later.
Okay, that's fine. Um, I do have a bit of a time limit, so maybe I can start
Yeah, sure. If you want to start,
already, if that's
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. Yeah, I
Yeah. Hi, Aubrey.
think Aubrey is
On
in
mute.
office, so
Oh,
it's kind of
okay.
difficult for him
Okay.
to respond.
No, that's fine. Okay. Um, Cool. So let me start explaining what our project was. I don't know how much Rudolph has told you. Um,
No, no, he's
okay.
basically just told us to set up interviews with you guys. He hasn't
Okay.
really explained in terms of
What each
what
person
you
does.
guys. Yeah,
Okay. And how many interviews do you have?
we just had two with you being one of them. The
Okay.
other person was Imran Beg from what's it? Young Urbanists. So, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, let me share my screen quickly, and then I think that's going to be the easiest.
Okay.
I'm going to do this so you can have an idea of what the project looked like and what we did. Um, so Jakupa was doing the District 6 public realm strategy. Now that's a project that's commissioned by the city. Um, so it's not a housing project per se. There's no housing component of it, but it's basically the national government does the restitution housing. Um, so bringing back people who were dispossessed of land
Yeah.
within District 6, they're in charge of that component, and the city is not allowed to touch that component. But what the city wanted to do is preemptively create an urban realm, so that it's not, a neighborhood built in the middle of nowhere with absolutely no public space that's useful to the community, so a complete neighborhood. So we were in charge of running that process. So just to give you an idea of how it fits in, so you have the national government, their housing program, and then there are so many different spatial development frameworks that were developed over the years. So there's one by Nisa Mammon and Associates that was developed in 2012. And that's like an all-encompassing framework for all of District 6. You should definitely look at it. And then the city has taken that and kind of updated it. So they've taken that as a template and updated it with new kind of information to try and bring it into they have local spatial development plans for different portions of the city. So they've done that for District 6 as well. And so they brought her work into their LSDF system. And then out of that, kind of underneath that, there was a public realm strategy, which focuses not on the housing component, but on the streets and public spaces. So that's where we fit in. And we did it with a water study and an investment framework that kind of goes, okay, well, if this is the public realm strategy, then there are a few projects that come out of that so that the city can then allocate funding to it. And then so that they can construct something. So it doesn't just end up on a shelf. So yeah, our process was basically, we had our analysis, which was, we had a cultural historian and a few other heritage practitioners involved who'd go into the archives, feed us information. They'd kind of work with the communities. We gathered information from District 6 Museum, and we put together a lot of information, looked at old HIAs, so heritage impact assessments. So Lucian Lagrange did a heritage impact assessment for the area. There's a lot of good documentation on kind of the built fabric and heritage of District 6. So we took all of that analysis, tried to learn as much from it as possible, and then went to the community and went, what can you guys tell us about your neighborhood? So not making assumptions that we know everything because we read a few documents, but assuming that they can give us a lot more, right? And then worked with them through 6 workshops, each of them like a full half a day, where we go through a lot of topics. And this whole presentation is basically just going through those topics to try and figure out what strategies we have for the overall public realm, then what design guidelines we can give so that if someone comes in later and they go, we're developing this portion, they know what the bigger picture is so they can fit in and slot into that bigger picture. And then the investment framework, which tells the city which projects, it kind of packages the projects in a way that they can start implementing or start allocating funds towards District 6. Yeah. So we had most of this project, most of the time was given to developing a comprehensive collaborative process. So that's where your professor came in. He was part of that process because he's in CPUT, and in architecture, we asked him to sit in on some of the workshops. So this was also like during COVID. So we had online workshops or online briefing sessions, and then we tried to set up kind of focus groups where we would have members of different groups within District 6 that would join us. So we set up a group of like 25 people to workshop together, and each of them was representative from some particular group in District 6. So we'd contact the schools and the churches and the mosques and community members and organizations to try and kind of get a good representative group. And that's always a tricky thing with public participation is, you know, it's harder to workshop if you've got a much larger group, but you need the group to kind of be representative of as many people as possible, right? So yeah, we had 6 workshops. Do you have any questions so far?
No.
Okay. Yeah, so we had we had some public meetings online that's more like kind of telling the broader Cape Town about the project. And then we have the focus groups with what we called caretakers. So those people would come to all of the workshops, and it's like the District 6 Museum, and we got names. It took a really long time to set up the groups. And then they had 4 workshops that were about the public realm strategy, so the overall thing. And then we had 2 more workshops about the guidelines. So 6 workshops overall, and then lots of public meetings where you just explain what happened in the workshop. There's a question and answer session. And then we had exhibits at the City Hall, where it's up for 3 days and anyone can walk in, and you have members of the consulting team. So they're like lots of people on these teams. It's architects and urban designers, it's landscape architects, it's civil engineers, heritage consultants, cultural specialists. Yeah, that's just like a few of the people. So you have quite a wide range of like interdisciplinary people at these spaces, and people can walk in and chat to you and ask you to explain the project. Yeah. So I think that one of the important things with our project was also we try to meet people where they're at. So you try to, there'll be some auntie who's really good at emails but doesn't really use she won't go to a website, or there's someone who's really good at, they're on YouTube, they want to watch videos. There are people who are on WhatsApp and distribute information through WhatsApp groups. And then there are people who need things on paper, who want to come to the open house and see the physical thing. So we tried to get people to come in whatever form is easiest for them. So just have as many tools of communication as possible. So these are we distributed pamphlets. I'll show you an example of it as well. And then the workshops were obviously the most intensive kind of space where we could gather information from the community. So most of the people they either live in District 6 or, like your professor, would work there. But most of the people live there and have a vested interest, and are historically from there. So they have insight into what it is they want to see in their neighborhood and what their challenges are. Like, if someone feels that they can't walk here at night, or there's no public green space around them, they need more corner stores, or they will know because they live in the neighborhood. Their lived experience informs kind of your decisions in your design making process. So yeah. And then what came out of it was a series of documents, and you can find all of these. I'm going to show you now where they are. So they're all on this District 6 local neighborhood plan website of the city. The city took our documents and uploaded it. So it's all here. And I think it's probably quite a useful resource if you guys are doing a project in District 6. So there's an introduction, there's some mapping in this context one. This is our process of public participation. There's some good stories in there if you need. There's a section on the broader strategies, our investment framework, the guidelines, and little conclusion. If you go to access all resources, you'll get like pamphlets and video summaries and stuff like that. So this is like all the stuff that we developed. Yeah. There's also like, if you go further into the city's archives, you'll get like reports from way further back that will document kind of what the plans were before we started this process. And then we've since gotten projects out of this as well, where we're implementing something on Chapel Street. So it's it's not just stuff that sits on a shelf. So if you go into these things, this, for example, our process, you'll be able to see all of the each workshop that we had. So it documents it. It tells the stories of people. Yeah, so I would suggest you guys take a look at this. I know you had a story about, you had some questions about historical narratives and stories. This is probably the place to look, but then also do your own research. Next to Harrington Square, there's actually this mural of Miriam's flower, which is a flower that was very important to the community. So they had a process, and they went through a process of of deciding what to put on the wall. And the significance is that the flower dries out, but it kind of resurrects itself. So symbolically, that's kind of part of the District 6 narrative of, even if it looks like it's died, it's actually full of life and can reemerge. You know, there's a lot of stuff like that. There's the palm trees that were brought from Mecca that you see throughout District 6. There's a Krotoa sanctuary, which isn't in your portion, but you know, there's a lot of narratives that came out of this community process, right? So have a look at that. They go through, yeah, everything in a little bit more detail than I can do. And then there's a chapter that kind of gives you an idea of the guidelines for streets and public spaces. So you can have a look at that as well. For most of it, you know, we kind of figured out how to arrange the streets so that you have an artery that flows through the space, that's your activity spine, and then you have more local streets, and then you have there's a hierarchy of streets here. So you'll see how that works. And we've kind of suggested more commercial uses along the more important streets, and then the residential streets are obviously less commercial. So that will give you insight into kind of like the local economy and vibrancy and stuff. And I would also suggest you look at the mapping. Yeah, and then the strategy would also be useful for you guys. A lot of reading, so good luck. But yeah, so through the workshops, we also we structured them so that it starts with kind of the visioning exercises and the stories, and then works through larger themes and narratives, and then starts delving into each space, and then from that starts developing guidelines for the spaces. So maybe I'll just explain to you what the workshops were about. So the first one we did, you know, a visioning and a memory mapping. So each person had to kind of explain to us what their connection is, what their experience is of District 6 in whatever way they wish to do so, and then what their vision is for the public realm. So, you know, you can kind of have an idea of what they were talking about. So mobility and access, urban economies, positive edges, you know, accessibility, all of those things came up. But then you're still talking at a high conceptual level and not kind of what's happening on plan. So then the next workshop, these are the things that came out of it. The next workshop was spatializing that. So let's talk through, you had a vision for the space. Now what happens in each space, and what are the systems? So then you start to realize there's like more potential for an economic spine over here on New Hanover Street. And then there's a kind of route that all the school kids take, and that links to different educational institutions. So maybe that's like an educational spine. And there's Chapel Street, and some of it's still left over. So maybe that's more of a healing spine. You're pulling the energy from Trafalgar Park through to CPUT, and that connection. And there's a mosque in between. There's a school. There are a few churches. So yeah, that's, you kind of start seeing these systems emerge. And this was kind of not entirely planned. We heard what they were talking about. And then went, okay, so what does that translate into? And then afterwards we interpreted and realized people were really talking about systems. So each group, we split the workshop into groups, and each group came up with kind of their thinking around how the systems work in District 6. And it turned out that they were actually describing these kind of different types of systems. So then after this, we thought, okay, well, let's start mapping the spaces along these systems and routes. And that's where the next workshop jumped into kind of what happens at each space. So each group, there were 5 groups, and each group got a section of it, and then were asked to describe what they feel happens along these spaces. So the aunties who live along Chapel Street were pulled into this workshop where they
Mm.
can go, well, I know what happens at the circle. I know what happens at the school. The District 6 Museum got pulled into the discussion around Harrington Square because they're so close to it. So they have a vested interest in what happens around there, right? And then, CPUT would have, contributed to what happens around here and the educational spine behind them. So we try to make sure that everyone gets input into their space that they know most about, and that they can give us feedback into that. So we got lots of spaces out of that. And then we made this matrix of prioritizing the spaces. So we got the community to vote on them. We looked at the land ownership, whether it's zoned for restitution or not, whether you need additional planning applications. And then out of that, we got a handful of projects that made sense to kind of implement quite soon, whereas this longer list is something that's a more extended time frame. Yeah, and then we had some more workshops where you delve into actual placemaking. So what do you want to see on a street? So you want, say, little bicycle lanes, or you see a bus route as important, or there's, an intersection that you want to accentuate, and you want benches along the street. So we discussed those kind of things with people through these workshops, and then made some streets with them. And then all of this fed into our guidelines. So our guidelines are also on the website. And it just talks to, if you make a park, what do you need to consider? You need to consider lighting, you need to consider play equipment, you need to consider providing eyes on the street. So yeah, we had guidelines for streets and we had guidelines for open spaces. So this became kind of the guideline section. And then all of the spaces kind of got categorized according to these things, because you don't want to be overly prescriptive, but you do want to make suggestions that help people to design spaces. So this is the street guideline. So every guideline was kind of divided into an overarching plan, what are the considerations in terms of connectivity, in terms of greening it, in terms of the culture and heritage, and in terms of activation. And then we had a page on, this is how the section gets laid out, this is what it looks like in plan. But for each space, we basically worked through the layers of connectivity, greening, culture and heritage, and activation to come up with something that was more holistic. Yeah, so that's what we did for this project. And then that matrix that explained kind of the wide range of projects, we looked at which projects the city could implement first and most easily. And Chapel Street came out of that. So now we've been working with the Chapel Street community on this particular part of District 6. So we're looking at this whole street. It will be upgraded in 2025. Yeah, okay. So we explained this process already, how you get to this project. And then with them, we had another intensive workshop with people who live along the street and who have businesses there, and who have a vested interest in it. And then we're now on our second open house. So yeah, on the 24th, we're having an open house there where it's just the plans for the street that are being exhibited. We've gone through the process with the community to look at the heritage and look at the street layout and look at the kind of design around each space. So now we've developed the conceptual plan, and then now we're developing the technical resolution of it. So then after this, the project will go out to tender and get implemented. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had more workshops with them. Yeah, and it basically came down to explaining to them that kind of the difference between the roads that you have in District 6 in the past that are really busy and vibrant, and the street that you have there now, which is very car orientated and comes from kind of a modernist planning perspective, and how to change that into something that's, you know, great for the lived experience, where people can walk along there and have a lived experience that's similar to that you would have access to in the past, instead of this dead zone. You know, and how the streets were used before versus how they're used now. It's kind of a conduit for cars as opposed to a space that people live in. Yeah, so we did some mapping with them. And then we also explained, you know, this maybe speaks to one of your questions around where else in Cape Town you're seeing projects. There are a lot of spaces where people have tried to do traffic calming, have tried to create more pedestrian friendly spaces. So these are some examples of those. Yeah, where they've tried to create spaces for NMT, or they've had a bump out because it's next to a school, it needs to be safer, or pedestrianize the street.
And you guys are involved in all of these?
No,
not really. Okay.
No, we're just involved in the one at District 6.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we did some mapping with the community, but yeah. And then so we'll have another exhibit on the 24th of Feb. But we already had one, and we do also record what we do in these pamphlets so that people can send it out on WhatsApp. So we'll send it to like a WhatsApp group in the community and hope that they find it interesting enough to send on. But you know, there's never a guarantee of that. But yeah, now that you at least know what the project was about, I don't know if some of these questions make a little bit more sense to you.
I think it gives more. I mean, the questions that we've asking is probably all explained in the document itself. So I think it serves quite a good purpose, rather than you then going to re-explaining everything. And I mean, these are, you can see all the information as with the the mapping and how you've engaged with the community and everything. So yeah, it's quite good, informative.
Yeah. So, I mean, also this is a kind of special case project where the project is actually about the public realm and about creating a more pedestrian friendly environment and a safer environment and a more comfortable environment for the lowest common denominator, which is the pedestrian. So it's a kind of very unusual project in that sense, because usually you'll get the housing project. So we've done housing projects as well, which you should also look at. There's some housing projects that, you know, your goal is mainly to get as many numbers in as possible. Or if you're working with developers, quite often you know, the main goal isn't public interest and isn't creating a beautiful space. The main goal is to get as much
numbers.
Rental
from.
Exactly. So this is kind of a special case where you get to actually ask, okay, well, what makes the public realm a more comfortable space for everyone? And that's quite a special space to be in. And then also the fact that we're looking to bring in narratives of heritage into the space. We're looking at signage. We're looking at kind of the stories of District 6 over time. So, you know, everything from the French battlement wall to on Trafalgar Park and those kind of historic lines of the city, to and that was kind of the very colonial period, to right now when you're having kind of the return of people to District 6. And there's a whole bunch of narratives in between. So I'd also encourage you to not see District 6 as a space with one narrative. There are so many different stories. A lot of the stories are kind of about people's childhoods, because at this stage, people who are dispossessed of housing and land are people who are older. So they remember their childhoods in the space. But remember, it was also a space of multiculturalism, of a lot of different languages being spoken, different cuisines. So I urge you to not see it as a homogenous space, but as one that, you know, has so many different cultural stories attached to it. And I think if you have you gone to the District 6 Museum?
No, we haven't gone yet. I
Okay.
believe there's an exhibition in, at the moment
Yeah, you should
about.
definitely go past it. It gives you a good kind of time capsule of what it used to be. I definitely encourage you to go have a look at them and maybe chat to them if you can about your project. Because yeah, there's so much richness to this area, and yeah, it's quite difficult to navigate all of the different narratives without being reductive, and you don't want to be reductive about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but
So we should actually go. Yeah. Go out. Oh, well, just down the road to the District 6, the museum.
yeah, it's like a short
Yeah.
walk.
Yeah.
And then the other thing to be aware of is I noticed you guys were talking about creativity and things like that. So there are also some art projects that came out of it. So the District 6 Museum has done a whole bunch of art projects, like they've done cooking books, they've done tapestries. Um, there's the QP project which came out of it. There's all kinds of um, art projects that came out of it. And then also things like recently there's a mural that's gone up at one of the parks. So there was I think 16 workshops to get to a point where they did a collaborative mural with a lot of community members. Um, and we're also starting a process where there's a local art facilitator in the community who is being appointed to run a workshop with her community, basically, where she can produce an artwork um, with inputs from the community that will go onto different like walls that have murals on them now. So
Okay.
there are lots of different projects happening in the space. But I
Hmm.
know Harrington Square is another yeah, a whole new project by itself.
Yeah. Yeah, because
Yeah,
also the rest of that Harrington street is also very
mm.
different, and I mean very much. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of actual heritage
Oh, there's
concerned.
lots.
No, but I mean, like in the street there, most of the buildings there and the type of architecture there is kind of like if you I think the only building that is kind of in that architecture is where what's it, New York Bagel is. I think that is like the only building that's still in that type of architecture of that. But I mean, the rest of it up the road is
But
all these new structures and.
But remember, it's not just about how old the building is. So I think
Mm,
you need to look at heritage beyond a building.
mm,
Heritage is also kind of what was the purpose of the street, what was along the
mm,
street. And I think if you look at the old maps from that perspective and the stories that came from that street, you'll see there's a
mm,
much richer memory than kind of saying, oh, well, the building's new, so there's no heritage. There's also kind of the Fugard Theatre that was there. There's the old St. Mark's Church, I think, that was between Buitengracht and Harrington Street. There was an old Jewish bookstore along that street, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, there's a whole bunch of businesses that were around that space that were quite important
mm.
as well. So it is actually a street that was kind of a lower level commercial space. And I don't know how you do justice to that space and think about gentrification in a different way,
Yeah,
because people, no longer have economic access to the
yeah,
space that's now being created. Um, so it's more complicated than just thinking of it as there's no heritage value in there. There's immense heritage value in there. And maybe
mm,
just looking at how the street has changed over time is quite important as well.
mm.
So I'd
Yeah, no,
definitely have a look at the historical maps. Try and see what you can find. There are also a lot of documents on the East City or Fringe
okay.
City. I know BHK did a no, Guy Briggs did a document like years ago some of it's, I think, not really relevant anymore. But there's a lot written on that portion of the city. So,
Okay.
and also Harrington Square did have forced removals at some stage. Um, and it's now being seen as kind of a future public space because the city
Mm.
doesn't have a lot of public space. There's such a shortage of public space that you kind of need the relief within the urban fabric, because if you're building up and creating more density, you also need public space. So I think at the moment it's seen as a space that will be transformed more into a square or park.
Okay.
But it's a glorified parking lot right now, and
Yeah.
a good location for students to experiment with kind of the idea of housing and mixed use.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fun
Okay.
project.
Yeah, no, it is quite a fun.
Yeah.
Also, yeah, I think it's going to be a fun one.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just urge you to try and find the stories in the
Mm.
immediate surroundings of your building. Um, there are larger narratives of District 6 that are important to acknowledge. And then there are stories about what happens specifically in your street as well. And maybe that gives
Yeah.
you an idea of, what to include and what to exclude from your project.
Yeah.
Um, and gives you kind of I think the more information you have, the more creativity you add to the project. So
Yeah.
I am a firm believer that the single designer doesn't know what they're doing unless they get information from elsewhere. We do not design and avoid. And if you're not getting input from the community directly, you need to get input from the research that other people have done.
Mm.
Um, and
Yeah, so you
you
understand the
know,
space better and also not
yeah,
just designing for, as you say, designing for the developer, but actually designing
yes.
for the community.
Yeah.
Mm.
And you can
Mm.
obviously, if you're in practice one day, you can make an argument for why the developer should consider this, because it will be better for the bottom line because people like nicer spaces. But,
Mm.
for a student project, you can really lean into
Yeah.
trying to understand the narrative for yourself and suggest things that are a little bit more out of the box.
Yeah.
Yeah, fun project. Are there any
Yes.
of these are there any of the questions that you're like feeling you don't really have your head around, you don't really understand, um, or parts of our project that you still have questions about?
No, I think it kind of, I mean, we can answer the questions from
Mm,
well, the document. So, yeah, from my side, there's no
okay.
other further questions.
These aren't questions that you were given. They're questions that you're kind of thinking through for yourselves, right?
Yeah, we just
Okay.
came up
Yeah.
with questions
Okay.
for what we're going to ask. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool. No, that's good.
So,
If you feel comfortable with this, that's fine. You're welcome to shoot me an email if you have other
if it is,
questions, or you feel like you come back to one of the questions and you go, I don't quite understand this part, you can just email me.
mm, okay.
And if I
Thank you.
don't respond, you can call me and I'll chat to you quickly about it. Okay,
Okay. Yeah, well,
cool.
yeah, no, we will do. Thanks again for finding the time or allowing us the
Sure.
time for the interview and
No,
all
totally.
the information.
And use the resources. This is not written by the city, so it's not, biased in that sense, but
Mm,
they have uploaded it to their website, and it's there for public use. So, I
yeah,
mean, you have so much information at your fingertips. And I'm
yeah.
sure Rolf's doing a really great job at giving you other information as well. So,
Mm.
yeah, good luck.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very
Okay,
much, and
cool.
yeah, enjoy
Thanks.
your time off next week.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay,
Right.
bye. Good luck.
Bye. Cheers. Bye. Thank you.